Chapter 1: The Hum Below Silence. The static on the cheap radio was a physical weight against Lyra Kale's eardrums. She twisted the dial, a faint whine accompanying the motion, the plastic protesting. Rain, a relentless gray sheet, hammered the roof of her battered sedan, each drop a tiny percussion against the thin metal. Beyond the smeared windscreen, the fence line of the Voronoi facility stretched into the mist, a rusted spine against a bruised sky. It had taken her 3 days of driving, fueled by stale coffee and a stubborn academic itch, to reach this forgotten corner of the state. The official records were sparse, sanitized. Acoustic Research and Development, decommissioned 1978. Unofficially, the Internet's darker corners spoke of stranger things, of sounds that weren't sounds, of a project too ambitious, too organic. Lyra killed the engine. The sudden absence of its thrumming was profound, replaced by the rain's relentless drumming and a deeper quiet that pressed in from the woods bordering the facility. It was this quiet, or the illusion of it, which had first snagged her attention in a declassified internal memo, a single line redacted almost to oblivion. Achieved projected null field, auditory vacuum surpassed initial parameters. What did it mean to surpass an auditory vacuum? Her synesthesia, a constant companion, usually painted sounds as colors, textures, even phantom tastes. Silence for her was never truly empty. It was a canvas of subtle hues, the ghost echoes of what had been or what might be. But the rumors surrounding Voronoi hinted at something else, a silence that consumed. She pulled the hood of her parka over her head, the damp chill already seeping into her bones. Her fingers, nimble from years of handling delicate archival equipment, fumbled with the clasp of her satchel. Inside, a high-sensitivity microphone, a portable recorder, and a dog-eared printout of the facility's last known schematic. "Probably a wild goose chase," she muttered, the words swallowed by the rain. Yet a peculiar vibration tickled the soles of her feet, a faint tremor transmitted through the car's floor. It was almost too low to be sound, more a physical presence. Her synesthesia tinged the air before her eyes with a deep, oily purple, a color she associated with profound bass frequencies, the kind that could liquefy organs. The fence was topped with rusted barbed wire, several sections sagging or torn. Finding a way in wouldn't be difficult for someone determined. She walked the perimeter, mud sucking at her boots. The rain plastered her hair to her forehead. About 100 yards down, a section of the fence had collapsed entirely, peeled open like a sardonic grin. Nature was reclaiming Voronoi, but slowly, reluctantly. Beyond the breach, the grounds were a mess of weeds and decaying outbuildings. The main structure loomed in the distance, a brutalist concrete block, windows like vacant eyes. The air here was different. The rain's patter seemed muted, absorbed by something unseen. The purple tremor intensified, accompanied now by a faint, almost imperceptible pressure against her eardrums. It wasn't a noise, not yet, but the promise of one. Lyra activated her recorder, adjusting the microphone's gain. Entry point secured, approximately 0900 hours, ambient conditions. Unusual. Her voice sounded thin, reedy. She pushed through a thicket of thorns, wincing as one snagged her sleeve. The main building was closer now. A massive steel loading door, corrugated and scarred, was sealed shut. Smaller personnel doors dotted the facade, equally uninviting. She tried one, a heavy steel plate with a recessed handle. Locked. Another, further down, yielded with a groan of tortured metal when she put her shoulder into it. The opening was a sliver of absolute black. The purple hum in her vision deepened, now shot through with flickers of sickly green, a combination that usually signified complex, layered harmonics, often discordant. A gust of wind, carrying the scent of wet concrete, ozone, and something else. Something metallic and faintly organic, like old blood mixed with copper, breathed from the opening. It wasn't a welcoming scent. "Here goes nothing," Lyra whispered, more to herself than the recorder. She squeezed through the gap. Inside, the darkness was almost total. Her pupils struggled to adjust. The air was cold, heavy, and vibrated with that subsonic pulse. It was a physical entity in the gloom. She fumbled for the small flashlight clipped to her satchel, its beam cutting a weak swathe through the oppressive black. She stood in a narrow corridor, concrete walls weeping moisture. Pipes, thick as an arm, ran along the ceiling, disappearing into the shadows. Some were wrapped in decaying insulation, others bare and corroded. The floor was gritty underfoot. The hum was stronger here, a tangible force. Lyra could sense it resonating in her chest cavity, a subtle, unpleasant thrumming. Her synesthetic colors swirled, the deep purple now laced with flashes of that bilious green, and a new, disturbing crimson that pulsed in time with the vibration. Crimson, for her, often meant pain or the potential for it. She moved cautiously, flashlight beam dancing ahead. The corridor opened into a larger space, a reception area of sorts. A rusted metal desk sat askew, drawers hanging open. Papers, swollen and mildewed, lay scattered like dead leaves. A single, overturned chair. Everything was coated in a thick layer of dust and decay. A sound, not the hum, something else. A faint, rhythmic scraping. Lyra froze, her breath catching in her throat. She swept the flashlight beam across the room. Nothing. The scraping came again, closer this time, seeming to emanate from a hallway leading deeper into the facility. It was a dragging sound, like something heavy being pulled across rough concrete. Her heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't part of the academic exploration. This was unexpected. The purple-green-crimson aura intensified, the colors almost painful to perceive. The hum seemed to drop a few hertz, becoming a palpable pressure that made her teeth ache. The scraping stopped. Silence descended again, but it was a charged silence, thick with anticipation. Lyra held her breath, straining her ears. The only sound was the frantic thumping of her own heart and the ever-present, bone-deep thrum of the facility itself. She took a hesitant step towards the hallway, then another. The beam of her flashlight pierced the darkness. At the far end, something was slumped against the wall. It was too shadowed to make out clearly. "Hello," her voice was a small, trembling thing. "Is anyone there?" No response, only the hum pressing insistent. She edged forward, the beam fixed on the shape. As she drew closer, details began to emerge. It wasn't a person. It was a pile of something, discarded equipment, rags, no. It was a tangle of thick cables and what looked like rusted metal struts, all interwoven with something darker, something that glistened wetly in the flashlight's beam. And from the center of the mass, a single, slender pipe, like a tarnished flute, pointed accusingly towards the ceiling. A low, guttural click emanated from within the tangle, followed by a slow, deliberate drag as one of the cable-like tendrils shifted an inch across the floor. It was testing, or perhaps adjusting. The scraping sound resumed, but this time it was accompanied by a wet, tearing noise. Lyra stumbled backwards, a choked gasp escaping her lips. The colors in her vision flared, a nauseating kaleidoscope. The facility wasn't just abandoned, it was occupied. And the hum, she realized with a sudden, sickening clarity, wasn't just ambient noise. It was a heartbeat, a vast, slumbering, metallic heartbeat, and something within its depths was stirring. Chapter 2: The Warden's Domain. The rhythmic scraping intensified, a sickening counterpoint to the pervasive thrum that vibrated through Lyra's bones. The tangled mass of cables and metallic refuse at the end of the hall shifted again, a grotesque parody of life. A section of it, resembling a mangled conduit, lifted slightly, then slammed down, producing a dull, resonant clang. Lyra didn't wait to see more. She spun on her heel, her boots skidding on the grimy concrete, and plunged back the way she came, towards the narrow sliver of gray light that marked her entry point. Panic lent speed to her movements. She squeezed through the resistant door, bursting out into the rain-swept open, gasping for air that didn't taste of dust and decay. The relative silence outside, broken only by the storm, was a momentary reprieve. She didn't stop running until she reached the collapsed section of the fence, scrambling through the thorns, not caring about the scratches. Back in her car, she fumbled with the keys, her hands shaking. The engine coughed, then caught. She slammed the gear stick into reverse, tires spinning in the mud before finding purchase. As she sped away from the Voronoi facility, the image of that shifting, scraping horror was burned into her mind. The oily purple and sickly green of the ambient hum still stained her vision, but now it was shot through with jagged streaks of terror red. She drove for an hour, putting as much distance as possible between herself and that place, before pulling over onto the shoulder of a deserted country road. The rain had lessened to a drizzle. Her breath still came in ragged gasps. "What was that thing?" she whispered to the empty car, the recorder still clutched in her hand. She pressed play. Her own frightened voice, the scraping, the clang, and beneath it all the omnipresent, deeply unsettling hum. Even through the small speaker, it had a physical quality. Her academic curiosity warred with a primal urge to never go near that place again. But the auditory vacuum surpassed initial parameters. And the hum, it wasn't random noise. It was structured, almost intentional. The scientist in her, the part that craved understanding, couldn't let it go. The synesthesia, usually a source of wonder, now presented the sounds of Voronoi as a horrifying, compelling tapestry. A week later, Lyra was back, not at the main entrance but several miles away, consulting a different, older schematic she'd unearthed from a county planning archive, one that showed a network of maintenance tunnels supposedly sealed. She spent the intervening days researching, driven by a grim fascination. The Human Instrument Project, as some of the wilder online theories dubbed it, was mentioned in fragmented, often contradictory posts. Whispers of a colossal device, part machine, part something else, designed to contact other intelligences through sonic manipulation. Most of it sounded like paranoid fantasy. But that thing in the corridor. This time she was better prepared. A more powerful flashlight, a small pry bar, protein bars, water, and a profound sense of trepidation. She found the tunnel entrance hidden beneath a tangle of overgrown ivy, a circular concrete cap half buried in the earth. The pry bar made short work of the rusted hinges. Below, a narrow iron ladder descended into blackness. The air that wafted up was cold, stagnant, carrying the same metallic, faintly organic tang, but the oppressive hum was less pronounced here, more a distant vibration. She clipped the flashlight to her belt, switched on her headlamp, and began the descent. The tunnel was cramped, circular, and lined with smooth, cold concrete. Water dripped rhythmically from unseen cracks. Her boots echoed unnervingly in the confined space. According to the schematic, this tunnel should intersect with the facility's sub-basement levels. It was a longer, more circuitous route, but hopefully it would bypass whatever guarded the upper hallways. After what felt like an eternity of walking in the echoing dark, the tunnel opened into a wider space, a junction room. Several other tunnels branched off, their destinations lost in shadow. The air here was noticeably colder, and the hum was stronger, resonating up through the floor. Her synesthetic colors began to reassert themselves, the deep, vibrating purple, the nauseating green. A flicker of movement in the periphery of her headlamp beam. Lyra froze. She swept the light around. Nothing. Just pipes, conduits, and the damp sheen of the walls. Just nerves, she told herself, her voice barely a whisper. She consulted the schematic again, trying to orient herself. One tunnel, larger than the others, seemed to lead towards the facility's core. She chose that one. The further she walked, the more the environment changed. The concrete walls were interspersed with sections of riveted metal plating. Strange, organic-looking cables, thick as pythons and pulsating faintly, snaked along the walls and ceiling, disappearing into unseen machinery. They were a dark, unhealthy-looking brown, and where they were breached, a viscous black ichor oozed slowly. The hum grew louder, more complex. It wasn't just a single frequency anymore. Layers of sound, mostly subsonic, wove together, creating a disorienting, almost physically painful pressure. The purple in her vision deepened to near black. The green became more vibrant, more sickening, and streaks of the crimson pain color pulsed rhythmically. She came to a heavy steel door, marked with a faded, stenciled number, B07. A small, grimy window was set into it. Lyra wiped it clean with her sleeve and peered through. The room beyond was vast, cathedral-like, disappearing into shadows above and beyond the reach of her light. It was a cavern of machinery, pipes, and enormous curved structures that defied easy description. Some resembled gigantic organ pipes, others like the bells of grotesque brass instruments. And everywhere those pulsating, organic cables, connecting everything, like the veins and arteries of some colossal, sleeping beast. This, she realized with a jolt, had to be part of the instrument. But it was the figure standing in the center of the room, bathed in the dim, ambient glow from some unseen light source, that made her blood run cold. Tall, gaunt, dressed in what looked like a modified technician's uniform, stained and patched. The man stood perfectly still, his head slightly bowed, as if listening intently to the cacophony of the machinery. One hand rested on a large, lever-studded console. His posture was one of ownership, of belonging. As Lyra watched, he slowly raised his head. Even from this distance, through the dirty window, she could see his face. Pale, drawn, with eyes that seemed to absorb the dim light, reflecting nothing. He wasn't looking at her, but his gaze swept the room with a slow, methodical precision, like a searchlight. Warden Umbral. The name sprang to her mind from one of the more detailed, if unverified, online accounts. The facility's chief technician, who had supposedly disappeared when it was decommissioned, or, as some tailies suggested, had never left. Umbral's head stopped its sweep, fixing on a point somewhere to Lyra's left. He remained motionless for a long moment. Then, with an unnerving, fluid grace, he reached out and depressed one of the levers on the console. A deep, resonant clang echoed through the chamber, so powerful Lyra felt it vibrate through the steel door and into her chest. It was followed by a series of clicks and whirs, and a section of the machinery far off to her left began to glow with a faint, internal luminescence. The hum of the facility pitched slightly, a subtle shift in its complex song. Umbral didn't react. He simply stood there, a silent sentinel in his domain of monstrous sound. Lyra backed away from the door, her heart pounding. He hadn't seen her. He couldn't have, but he was aware. He was part of this place, an extension of its will. She had to get out of this tunnel, find another way. She turned to retreat, but a new sound stopped her. A faint, metallic screeching coming from the tunnel behind her. It was closer than it should be. Different from the scraping horror she'd encountered before, but no less menacing. She flicked her headlamp beam down the tunnel. Two pinpricks of red light glowed in the darkness, about 30 yards away, low to the ground. They were moving towards her, accompanied by that high-pitched, metallic scraping. Trapped, the warden in front, something unknown behind. The facility was closing in. The colors of the hum intensified, swirling around her, a visual representation of the tightening net. The air itself seemed to press against her, heavy with unsung notes and unspoken threats. Chapter 3: Echoes in Ruined Flesh. The twin red pinpricks advanced, the metallic screeching growing louder, resolving into the distinct sound of metal claws dragging across concrete. Lyra's breath hitched. Retreating towards Warden Umbral and the colossal, humming chamber was unthinkable. The unknown horror in the tunnel behind her was an immediate, tangible threat. She pressed herself against the cold, damp wall, trying to make herself smaller, her headlamp beam fixed on the approaching lights. They were accompanied by a series of rapid, clicking noises, like a giant insect's mandibles. The purple and green of the facility's pervasive hum seemed to curdle in her vision, shot through with threads of an icy, fearful blue. The creature emerged into the fuller illumination of her headlamp. It was low-slung, roughly the size of a large dog, but its form was a nightmarish amalgamation of corroded metal and glistening, dark flesh. 4 multi-jointed limbs, tipped with razor-sharp metal hooks that served as feet, propelled it forward with a jerky, unnatural gait. Its body was a compact mass of fused pipes, wires, and what looked disturbingly like stretched, leathery hide. Where a head should have been, A cluster of optical sensors glowed with that baleful red light, mounted on a swiveling turret that clicked audibly as it scanned the tunnel. It was one of the Cord Striders, just as the fragmented forum posts had described, a biomechanical guardian or scavenger. Lyra fumbled in her satchel, her fingers closing around the cold steel of the pry bar. It wasn't much of a weapon against that. The Cord Strider paused, its sensor cluster focusing directly on her. A low hiss, like escaping steam mixed with a distorted animalistic growl, emanated from a grill on its chassis. It lunged. Lyra screamed, a raw, instinctive sound, and threw herself sideways. The Strider's hooked claws scraped against the concrete where she'd been standing, sending sparks flying. She scrambled to her feet, swinging the pry bar wildly. It connected with one of the creature's limbs with a dull clang, but the Strider barely seemed to register the impact. It reoriented itself with terrifying speed, its red eyes fixed on her. It lunged again. This time Lyra was slower. One of its claws caught her thigh, tearing through her trousers and biting into flesh. A searing pain shot up her leg. She cried out, stumbling, the pry bar clattering to the floor. The Strider advanced, its hooked limbs clicking, its sensors whirring as it zeroed in for another strike. Lyra scrabbled backwards, her injured leg screaming in protest. This was it. This was how her morbid curiosity ended, torn apart by a biomechanical nightmare in a forgotten tunnel. Suddenly, a deafening, metallic screech, far more powerful and piercing than anything the Cord Strider produced, erupted from the direction of the B-07 door. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated agony and rage, so intense it made Lyra clap her hands over her ears, even through the pain in her leg. The Cord Strider froze, its sensor cluster swiveling towards the source of the new sound. The red lights flickered erratically. The door to B-07 shuddered violently, then buckled outwards with a horrifying shriek of tearing metal. A grotesque limb, a fusion of corroded brass tubing and pale, sinewy flesh, punched through the weakened steel. It thrashed wildly, ending in a splayed, multi-jointed appendage that looked like a deformed metallic hand. The Cord Strider emitted a series of rapid, agitated clicks. It seemed torn between Lyra and this new, far more formidable entity. The limb retracted, then slammed through the door again, widening the gash. Through the opening, Lyra caught a glimpse of something vast and shadowy moving within the chamber, and a shape, vaguely humanoid but monstrously distorted, struggling against unseen restraints. Another metallic scream tore through the air, this one resonating with a distinct, almost musical pattern of pain. It was followed by a wet, tearing sound. The Cord Strider, abandoning Lyra, scuttled rapidly towards the ravaged door, disappearing into the darkness of the tunnel from which it had come, its metallic claws receding into the distance. Lyra lay there, panting, her thigh throbbing. The immediate threat was gone but replaced by something potentially far worse. The sounds from beyond the B-07 door were horrific, tearing metal, wet, guttural chokes, and those soul-wrenching metallic screams. Hesitantly, driven by a desperate need to understand what had just saved her, or at least what had distracted her attacker, Lyra pulled herself up, using the wall for support. Her leg buckled, but she gritted her teeth against the pain. She retrieved her pry bar, now more a crutch than a weapon, and limped towards the ruined door. The opening was wider now, a jagged wound in the steel. She peered through. The vast chamber was still mostly in shadow, the ambient glow insufficient to illuminate its full extent. But closer to the door, she could now see the source of the commotion. A figure, or what was left of one, was contorted within a massive metallic framework that seemed to be part of a larger, unseen apparatus. It was a male form, or had been once. Now, it was a horrifying fusion of man and machine. Thick, organic cables, the same kind she'd seen in the tunnels, were fused directly into its flesh, disappearing into its torso and limbs. Its arms were pinned by heavy clamps, and its legs were encased in articulated metal braces that were bolted to the floor. Its head was craned back at an unnatural angle, held in place by a cage-like metal harness. Its vocal cords, Lyra saw with a sickening lurch, appeared to have been replaced or augmented by a series of thin, vibrating metallic filaments that stretched taut across its exposed throat. It was from these filaments that the agonized, metallic screams were emanating. This was Subject 808. 8. The name, whispered in hushed tones on those obscure forums, now had a face, a horrifying, tortured reality. He was one of the human components, a living part of the instrument. His struggles had apparently been triggered by Umbral's activation of the console. He was fighting against his bonds, thrashing with surprising strength, the movement causing the brass tubing fused to his limbs to groan and screech. One of his arms, the one that had punched through the door, was now free from its clamp, though still connected by a multitude of wires and smaller tubes. His eyes, wide and bloodshot, fixated on Lyra. There was no recognition, only raw, primal agony. He let out another choked, metallic wail, a sound that resonated deep within Lyra's chest, her synesthesia flaring with searing crimson and jagged shards of discordant orange. I won't hurt you," Lyra stammered, though the words sounded absurd even to her own ears. Eight's struggles subsided slightly. His gaze remained locked on her. The metallic filaments in his throat vibrated, producing a series of lower, guttural clicks and hisses, almost like an attempt at speech. Lyra took a hesitant step closer, wincing as her injured leg protested. "Can you understand me?" A long, shuddering hiss. Then a single, clear, metallic tone, followed by a choked, rasping sound that might have been a word. "Note." "Note," Lyra repeated, her mind racing. The broken note from the legends. The reason for the catastrophic event the facility was supposedly holding at bay. Eight thrashed again, a brief, violent spasm. The filaments vibrated, producing a rapid series of tones, almost like a distorted musical phrase, then another rasp. "Broken. She. Fixes." His gaze was intense, desperate. His one free hand, a grotesque thing of flesh and metal, gestured weakly towards the deeper recesses of the vast chamber, then towards Lyra herself. Lyra frowned. "Who is she, me?" Another series of painful clicks and hisses. The effort seemed to exhaust him. His head slumped slightly within the harness. The metallic filaments went slack for a moment, then hummed with a low, sorrowful threnody. The pieces began to click into place, forming a terrifying picture. The instrument, the human components, the broken note, and her own unique synesthesia, her ability to perceive and perhaps even interact with sound on a level few could comprehend. Was this why she'd been drawn here? Was she the she-8 spoke of? The one who could fix the unfixable, mend the sound that threatened to unravel something. A cold dread seeped into Lyra, far deeper than the fear of the chord strider. This wasn't just about exploration or academic curiosity anymore. She was entangled in something far larger, far more horrifying. From deeper within the B07 chamber, a new sound arose. A slow, measured series of heavy clicks, like the tumblers of a colossal lock falling into place. Warden Umbral. He was aware of the disturbance. He was likely aware of her presence now. Eight's head snapped up, his eyes, wild with renewed terror, fixed on Lyra. The filaments in his throat vibrated frantically, producing a single, urgent, metallic shriek. Run! Then the lights in the B07 chamber began to flicker, and a deep, resonant hum, far more powerful than anything Lyra had experienced yet, started to build, shaking the very foundations of the facility. The catastrophic event. Was it beginning? Or was this just the instrument powering up, with Warden Umbral at its controls, now fully aware he had a new, unwilling candidate for his monstrous orchestra? The air crackled with an unseen energy, and the colors in Lyra's vision, the oily purples, the sickly greens, the pain-filled crimsons, swirled into a terrifying, overwhelming vortex of impending sound. Chapter 4: Discordant Harmonies. The rising hum was a physical assault. It pressed against Lyra's chest, vibrated in her teeth, and made the very air seem to shimmer. The flickering lights in the B07 chamber cast long, dancing shadows, transforming the already monstrous machinery into a phantasmagoria of grasping claws and gaping maws. Eight thrashed in his restraints, his metallic screams now almost drowned out by the overwhelming thrum of the awakening instrument. Run! His warning echoed in Lyra's mind, a desperate metallic plea. She didn't need further urging. Her brief, horrifying communion with Subject 808 had painted a grim picture of her potential fate. Warden Umbral was no longer a distant, observing figure. He was an active threat, his attention undoubtedly drawn by Eight's outburst and the damaged door. Lyra turned from the ruined doorway, her injured leg screaming in protest with every movement. The tunnel stretched before her, a dark, uncertain path. The chord strider had retreated that way. Perhaps it was clear, or perhaps it led to even greater dangers. At this point, any direction away from Umbral and the core of the instrument seemed preferable. She limped as fast as she could, her headlamp beam bouncing erratically, painting fleeting, distorted images on the tunnel walls. The pulsating, organic cables seemed to writhe in the periphery of her vision, their faint inner luminescence pulsing in time with the facility, quickening heartbeat. The synesthetic colors accompanying the hum intensified. The deep purples were now almost black, shot through with jagged fissures of electric green and blood red. It was a visual representation of immense, barely contained power. Behind her, from the B07 chamber, a new sound began to overlay the foundational hum. It was a series of distinct metallic tones, almost like a colossal pipe organ beginning a sinister prelude. Each note was clear, perfectly pitched, yet carried an undercurrent of profound menace. Umbral was testing the instrument, or perhaps preparing it. The tunnel ahead forked. The schematic she had briefly consulted was now a distant memory, useless in this immediate crisis. Left or right? She chose left, a purely arbitrary decision born of panic. The floor here was slick with the same black ichor she'd seen seeping from the damaged cables, and the air was thick with its coppery, organic scent. The sounds of the instrument grew slightly more distant as she moved further into the branching tunnel, but the pervasive vibration remained, a constant reminder of the immense power thrumming at the facility's heart. Her leg throbbed relentlessly. She tore a strip of fabric from the hem of her shirt and tied it tightly around the wound on her thigh, a makeshift bandage to staunch the bleeding. A low growl echoed from the darkness ahead. Lyra froze, her blood turning to ice. Not the metallic clicks of a cord strider, but something guttural, animalistic. Her headlamp beam cut through the gloom, revealing a pair of glowing yellow eyes. Then another pair and another. Silence hounds. The forum whispers had mentioned them too, canids mutated by long-term exposure to the facility's energies, their vocalizations absorbed by their strange fur, making them unnervingly silent hunters. But this growl was clearly audible, a territorial warning. Three of them blocked the tunnel, sleek, dark shapes with unnaturally long limbs and powerful jaws. Their fur seemed to ripple, absorbing the light of her headlamp, making their outlines indistinct. They didn't advance, but stood their ground, growling softly, their yellow eyes fixed on her. Lyra backed away slowly. "Easy now," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I don't want any trouble." The hounds didn't react to her words, their attention unwavering. She took another step back and then another. This tunnel was a dead end, at least for her. Turning, she limped back towards the fork, the hound's silent scrutiny a palpable weight on her back. They didn't follow. They were guardians of their particular territory, it seemed. Back at the junction, she took the right-hand path. This tunnel was narrower, the walls closer, the pulsating cables brushing against her shoulders as she passed. The air was colder here and carried a new scent, a sharp, acrid odor like burnt electronics. The tunnel opened abruptly into a vast, circular chamber. Unlike the raw, industrial feel of much of the facility, this room was lined with what looked like smooth black obsidian. In the center, a large crystalline structure rose from the floor, pulsating with a soft internal blue light. Strange symbols, unlike any language Lyra knew, were etched into its facets. Wires and smaller organic cables snaked from the crystal's base, connecting to consoles that lined the room's perimeter. Several of these consoles were smashed, their screens dark, wires spilling from their ruptured casings. Sabotage, or just decay. The air in this chamber was different. The overwhelming hum of the main instrument was dampened here, almost muffled. Instead, a high-frequency whine emanated from the central crystal, a sound that made Lyra's teeth ache and her synesthetic vision fill with shimmering silver needles. As she stepped further into the room, a section of the obsidian wall to her right shimmered and dissolved, revealing a hidden alcove. Standing within it was a figure, draped in dark, hooded robes that obscured its features. The chanter, the cultist who sought the chosen voce to mend the broken note. Lyra had almost forgotten about this particular threat in the face of Umbral and the facility's more monstrous inhabitants. The chanter's head, a deep shadow within the hood, turned slowly towards her. No eyes were visible, but Lyra felt a gaze of unnerving intensity. The voice unveiled, the chanter intoned, their voice a low, resonant hum that seemed to harmonize with the crystal's whine. It wasn't male or female, but something other. You carry the resonance. The unmaker seeks to silence it, to weave it into his cacophony, but the true song must be mended. Lyra stared, momentarily stunned. The unmaker, you mean Umbral? He is but a corrupted echo of the master's will, the chanter hummed. He serves the dissonance. We serve the purity of the first sound, the note that will call forth the listener from beyond. The figure took a gliding step out of the alcove. Its movements were unnervingly smooth, almost as if it floated. The broken note yearns for your timbre. Only you can complete the chord of ascendancy. I don't want to complete anything, Lyra said, her voice tight with fear and anger. I want to get out of this place. There is no escape from destiny, voice unveiled, the chanter replied, its tone unwavering. The great instrument is but a flawed conduit. The catastrophe it barely contains is a symphony of unraveling. Only by mending the broken note can the true harmony be achieved and the listener appeased. The chanter gestured with a shrouded hand towards the central crystal. This is a node of dampening, a sanctuary of sorts where the unmaker's grosser vibrations are filtered. Here one may contemplate the true path. Lyra noticed for the first time that the chanter carried a long, slender rod, tipped with a multifaceted crystal similar to the large one in the room's center. It pulsed with a faint, internal light. I'm not interested in your true path, Lyra said, backing away slowly, or your listener. But the listener is interested in you, the chanter hummed, taking another step towards her. Your unique frequency. It is a beacon. Even now, the unmaker recalibrates his machine, tuning it to your potential. He will find you. He will integrate you. And the purity will be lost to his discordant composition. The chanter raised the crystalline rod. Come, let us prepare you. The mending is a sacred act. It requires purification. The air around the chanter seemed to thicken. The silver needles in Lyra's synesthetic vision intensified, coalescing into sharp, threatening points. This was a different kind of danger than Umbral's raw power or the biomechanical predators. This was insidious, manipulative, wrapped in a cloak of religious fervor. Stay away from me, Lyra warned, raising her pry bar, though she knew it would be little use. The chanter continued its advance, the crystalline rod held aloft. The choice is not yours, voice unveiled. The song has been written. Your verse awaits. Suddenly, a section of the obsidian wall near the tunnel entrance exploded inwards with a deafening roar. Warden Umbral stood framed in the jagged opening, his pale face a mask of cold fury. His eyes, like chips of obsidian themselves, fixed on Lyra, then flicked to the chanter. One of his hands was now encased in a complex metallic gauntlet, wires snaking from it up his arm and into his uniform. It crackled with a faint blue energy. Interloper, Umbral's voice was a low growl, amplified by some internal mechanism, resonating with the facility's hum. You will not interfere with the primary component. He took a step into the chamber, the metallic gauntlet sparking. She is required for calibration. The chanter turned to face Umbral, its robed form radiating an unexpected menace. The voice unveiled will serve the true song, not your perverted score, Unmaker. The chanter's crystalline rod glowed brighter, emitting a high-pitched, piercing tone that seemed to push back against the facility's ambient hum. Umbral raised his gauntleted hand. The instrument demands its due. Dissonance will be harmonized. Sparks erupted from the gauntlet as Umbral gestured. A bolt of raw sonic energy, visible as a shimmering distortion in the air, shot towards the chanter. The cultist met it with a pulse of sound from its own rod, the two forces colliding in midair with a crack like thunder, throwing Lyra off her feet. The chamber plunged into chaos. Umbral and the chanter were locked in a bizarre duel of sonic energies, their attacks creating localized distortions, blasts of sound that shook the obsidian walls. The central crystal pulsed erratically, its blue light flickering wildly. Lyra scrambled backwards, her injured leg forgotten in the adrenaline surge. This was her chance. While these two opposing forces were occupied with each other, she might be able to escape. She crawled towards the jagged hole Umbral had created, the sounds of their battle shrieking frequencies, concussive blasts, and the guttural roars of the warden echoing around her. She reached the opening, glanced back. Umbral had forced the chanter back, the cultist's dark robe singed, its crystalline rod cracked. The warden was advancing, his gauntleted hand crackling with power. He was winning. Lyra didn't wait to see the outcome. She squeezed through the opening, back into the narrow service tunnel. The sounds of the battle receded slightly as she stumbled away, but the overriding hum of the facility, the sense of Umbral's presence, and the chanter's chilling pronouncements about her destiny pressed in on her. She was a pawn in a terrifying game, caught between two madmen, each with their own horrific plans for her and the monstrous instrument. And somewhere, Subject 808 remained, a tortured testament to the fate that awaited her if either of them succeeded. Her synesthesia was a canvas of screaming, clashing colors, the warden's brutal reds and blacks against the chanter's piercing silvers and insidious violets. Escape seemed less and less like an option, and more like a temporary deferral of an inevitable, horrifying purpose. Chapter 5: The Architect's Lament. Lyra fled through the warren of service tunnels, her breath tearing at her lungs, the phantom sounds of Umbral and the chanter's battle echoing in her ears. Each turn was a gamble, each shadow a potential threat. The facility was a living entity, its metallic heartbeat a constant, oppressive presence, and she was a foreign microbe it was trying to isolate or absorb. The encounter with the chanter had added a new, terrifying layer to her predicament. It wasn't just Umbral and his desire to calibrate her into the instrument. Now, there was a cult that saw her as a messianic figure, destined to mend their broken note and appease some cosmic listener. Both paths led to a loss of self, a surrender to forces beyond her comprehension. Eight's tortured face, his metallic screams, flashed in her mind, a constant reminder of the price of becoming a component. Her leg throbbed, a dull, persistent ache that made every step an effort. She needed to find a place to rest, to think, to try and make sense of the schematics she barely remembered. But safety was an illusion in Voronoi. After what felt like an age of aimless wandering, the tunnel she was in opened into a different kind of space. Not the raw, industrial utility of the maintenance corridors, nor the grand, ominous scale of the instrument chambers. This was smaller, almost personal. A cramped office, perhaps, or a private study. A single metal desk stood against one wall, its surface covered in a thick layer of dust, upon which lay scattered blueprints and technical drawings, their edges curled and yellowed with age. A single chair was overturned beside it. Bookshelves lined one wall, their contents mostly a pulpy, mildewed mess. But what drew Lyra's attention was the console built into the far wall. Unlike the crude, lever-operated panels she'd seen elsewhere, this one was more complex, with a darkened screen, a series of intricate dials, and a keyboard, its keys yellowed. It looked like a primary control interface, but older, perhaps a prototype or a dedicated monitoring station. And sitting before it, slumped in a high-backed chair that was surprisingly intact, was a skeletal figure. Lyra approached cautiously, her heart hammering. The skeleton was clad in the tattered remains of a lab coat. Its bony fingers rested on the keyboard, as if in mid-type. A pair of spectacles lay on the dusty console beside a tarnished silver pen. This had to be one of the original architects or scientists, someone who had died at their post. A wave of desolation washed over Lyra. This was the ultimate fate of those who delved too deep into Voronoi's secrets. As she drew closer, she noticed a small, metallic plaque affixed to the console beneath the screen. Chief Architect, Dr. Aris Thorne, Project Resonance Prime. Thorne. The name was familiar from some of the deepest, most obscure forum dives. He was the visionary, the mad genius who had conceived of the human instrument. And then, according to the fragmented legends, he had vanished, horrified by what he had unleashed. Perhaps this was Thorne, or what remained of him. Lyra's gaze fell upon a small, leather-bound journal lying open on the desk beside a blueprint depicting a terrifyingly complex section of the instrument. The pages were filled with cramped, spidery handwriting. She picked it up, her fingers trembling slightly. The ink was faded, but legible. The last entry was dated nearly 40 years ago. October 17th. The resonant cascade is beautiful, terrifying. It speaks in a language I almost understand, but the cost, the biointegration subjects, their screams are part of the music now. I hear them in my sleep. I tried to build a failsafe, a discordant chord that would shatter the primary resonance field, silence it before it fully awakens. But Umbral, my protege, my most fervent believer, he sees only the glory. He disabled the sequence. He calls it the song of creation. I call it the abyss. Lyra's blood ran cold. A failsafe. Thorne had tried to create a way to stop it. Umbral had disabled it. She read on, her eyes scanning the desperate, increasingly unhinged entries. Thorne wrote of the listener, the entity the instrument was designed to contact, describing it not as a god to be worshipped, as the chanter believed, but as a vast, indifferent cosmic horror whose attention would mean annihilation. The broken note wasn't just a malfunction. It was a symptom of the instrument trying to achieve a forbidden harmony, one that would fully open the gateway. October 21st. Subject 808. His integration was flawed. The note, the specific frequency nexus he was meant to embody, it fractured under the strain. Perhaps it's a mercy. The instrument is unstable now. The catastrophic event Umbral believes is a birthing pain is the very fabric of our reality tearing. My failsafe. I encoded a fragment of it, a seed of dissonance, into the core programming of the auxiliary control systems. If the primary conduits could be overloaded with a counter frequency, a specific, targeted sonic disruption, but it would require a unique catalyst, someone capable of perceiving and manipulating the resonant architecture itself. Someone, like me, but with a natural, intuitive gift. Lyra's breath caught in her throat, a unique catalyst, her synesthesia, her ability to feel the sounds, to see their structure. Thorne's writings seemed to be describing her. The journal continued, detailing Thorne's growing paranoia, his fear of Umbral, his descent into despair. The final pages were filled with complex equations, musical notations overlaid with circuit diagrams, and increasingly desperate pleas to an unseen reader. The console before me. It has limited control over the substructure harmonics, if the shutdown sequence, if the seed of dissonance can be amplified, if the correct counternote can be introduced directly at the point of fracture. But I am too weak. Umbral watches. He knows I doubt. He thinks I am part of the symphony. I am but a dying echo. The last legible line was a single, chilling phrase. It hears me. Even in silence, it hears me. Lyra closed the journal, her mind reeling. Thorne hadn't just died here. He had left a message, a desperate hope, a way to fight back. The console before her, the one Thorne's skeletal fingers still graced, might hold the key. She gently moved the skeleton's hand from the keyboard. The bones were brittle, dusty. With a surge of trepidation, she reached out and pressed a large, unmarked button on the console. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a low hum, the screen flickered to life, displaying a complex waveform analysis. Lines of code scrolled rapidly, too fast to read. System diagnostics, power levels, and in the center a stark message in blocky green letters. Resonance field integrity critical. Broken note sequence unstable. Catastrophic harmonic event imminent. Below it a smaller line flashed insistently. Auxiliary dissonance protocol. Standby. Awaiting catalyst input. Catalyst input, her. The colors of the facility's hum, which had been a chaotic swirl, now seemed to sharpen in Lyra's vision. The deep purples, the sickly greens, the painful crimsons, they were still there. But now, overlaid upon them, she could perceive finer threads, intricate patterns of silver and gold, the complex architecture of the sound itself. Thorne's journal, his desperate hope, had somehow attuned her. She wasn't just passively experiencing the sounds anymore. She was beginning to see their structure, their vulnerabilities. A new section of the console screen lit up, displaying a musical staff. A single note was highlighted, glowing an angry red. The broken note. and below it a representation of a keyboard waiting for input, waiting for her input. The task was monumental, terrifying. To find the counternote, the specific frequency that could disrupt the broken note without shattering the entire fragile system, or worse, accelerating the catastrophic event. It would require all her synesthetic perception, all her courage. But as she stared at the console, at the silent, accusing skeleton of Eris Thorne, a new sound reached her ears. Not the hum of the instrument, nor the distant echoes of battle. This was closer, a soft, rhythmic clicking, and the faint scent of ozone and something else, something like burnt sugar. Her head snapped up. Standing in the doorway of the small office, its multifaceted optical sensors glowing a malevolent red, was a chord strider. It wasn't the one she'd encountered before. This one was larger, its metallic components less corroded, its movements smoother, more predatory. And behind it, partially obscured by the doorframe, was the tall, gaunt figure of Warden Umbral. His gauntleted hand smoked faintly. The architect's folly, Umbral's amplified voice resonated in the small room, cold and devoid of emotion. He sought to silence the music, a futile gesture. His obsidian eyes fixed on Lyra, then on the glowing console. You have found his little back door, intriguing, but the primary component must be attuned through the main instrument, not this relic. The chord strider took a step into the room, its hooked claws clicking menacingly on the floor. Umbral's gaze lingered on the screen. The dissonance protocol, he always was a sentimental fool. A flicker of something unreadable crossed his face. No matter, the calibration will proceed. The song must be perfected. He gestured with his gauntleted hand. Bring her. The chord strider advanced, its red eyes burning into Lyra. Trapped again. But this time she wasn't just a terrified victim. Thorne's legacy, the glowing console, the plea from a long-dead architect, it had given her something she hadn't possessed before, a sliver of hope and the terrifying glimpse of a purpose that might be even more dangerous than becoming Umbral's component. The colors of sound swirled around her, no longer just a passive experience, but a battlefield she was beginning, just barely, to comprehend. The fight for Voronoi, for her own sanity, had truly begun. Chapter 6: Counter-Frequencies. The chord strider advanced, its metallic limbs clicking with predatory precision, each step bringing it closer to Lyra. Warden Umbral watched from the doorway, a gaunt specter of cold authority, his gauntleted hand still smoking faintly. The small office felt like a trap, the glowing console of Eris Thorne's legacy, a temporary, fragile shield. Lyra's mind raced. The dissonance protocol was active, awaiting her input. But with Umbral and his biomechanical hound blocking her escape, attempting to use the console seemed impossible. Yet, doing nothing meant capture, integration, becoming another screaming component in Umbral's monstrous instrument, like Subject 808. The synesthetic colors, the visual representation of the facility's sonic architecture, swirled intensely around her. The deep purples and bilious greens of the instrument's core hum were dominant. But now, thanks to Thorne's console, she could perceive the finer, sharper lines of potential counterfrequencies, the threads of brilliant silver and piercing gold. The broken note pulsed on the console screen, an angry red beacon of impending catastrophe. The cord strider was almost upon her, its red optical sensors whirred, focusing. One of its hooked forelimbs rose, preparing to strike or ensnare. In a desperate surge of adrenaline, Lyra acted. She slammed her hand down on a large, unmarked dial on Thorne's console, twisting it hard to the right. She had no idea what it did, but it was her only immediate option. A piercing shriek erupted from the console's small, integrated speakers, a discordant blast of high-frequency sound. It wasn't part of the instrument's usual repertoire. It was raw, untamed, chaotic. The synesthetic effect was a blinding flash of fractured white light that momentarily overwhelmed all other colors. The cord strider recoiled, its optical sensors flickering wildly. It emitted a series of distressed clicks and backed away a step, its movements becoming jerky and uncoordinated. The sudden, unexpected sonic assault had clearly affected its delicate systems. Umbral, too, flinched, raising his non-gauntleted hand to his head as if in pain. "Crude interference," he snarled, his amplified voice momentarily distorted. "The architect's spite lingers." Lyra didn't waste the opportunity. She grabbed the heavy, leather-bound journal from the desk and hurled it with all her strength at the cord strider's sensor cluster. The journal struck true, and the creature stumbled, its red eyes dimming for a second. She scrambled over the desk, her injured leg sending jolts of pain up her side, and lunged for the doorway. Umbral was still recovering from the sonic blast, his attention momentarily diverted. She squeezed past his tall frame, a faint scent of ozone and something indefinably old emanating from his stained uniform. He reached for her, his gauntleted fingers brushing her arm, sending a cold, electric tingle through her, but she was too quick. Out in the corridor she ran, not daring to look back. The sounds of Umbral's enraged roar and the cord strider's renewed, agitated clicking pursued her. The facility was a maze. She had no clear destination, only the desperate need to put distance between herself and Umbral. Thorne's office, with its tantalizing promise of a countermeasure, was lost to her, at least for now. But the brief interaction with the console had changed something within her. The dissonance protocol was active, and her synesthetic perception felt, amplified. She could still see those threads of silver and gold, the potential counter-frequencies, weaving through the oppressive gloom of the instrument's hum. She stumbled into a section of tunnels she hadn't explored before. These were narrower, older, the walls crumbling in places, revealing the raw earth beyond. The pulsating organic cables were less prevalent here, replaced by bundles of corroded, old-fashioned wiring. The air was thick with the smell of damp soil and decay. The sounds of pursuit faded. Perhaps Umbral had given up the immediate chase, confident in the facility's ability to eventually corner her. Or perhaps he was merely redirecting his efforts. She found a small alcove, barely large enough to crouch in, and slumped against the wall, gasping for breath. Her leg was on fire. She needed to rest, to think. Thorne's journal, she had lost it, but its contents were seared into her memory. The failsafe, the seed of dissonance, the need for a catalyst. The console in Thorne's office had shown her the broken note, a single, malevolent point in the sonic spectrum. If she could somehow generate the precise counterfrequency, introduce it into the system. But how? She didn't have access to Thorne's console anymore. Her synesthesia, however, was a constant. The colors and shapes of the sounds around her were more vivid, more detailed than ever before. She focused on the ever-present hum of the main instrument, the deep purples and greens. Then, she tried to isolate the angry red pulse of the broken note, the visual echo she'd seen on the screen. It was there, a discordant throb within the larger symphony of dread. And then she searched for its opposite, the silver and gold threads. One particular thread of shimmering, crystalline silver seemed to resonate in perfect opposition to the red pulse. A pure, clear frequency. Could she create it, or find something in this accursed facility that could? A new sound reached her, faint at first, then growing stronger. Not the mechanical menace of Umbral or his creations, nor the animalistic growls of the Silence Hounds. This was musical, a series of clear, high-pitched tones, almost like a flute but with an unnatural, metallic timbre. It was accompanied by a faint, rhythmic clanking. Curiosity, despite everything, tugged at her. She rose stiffly, peering out of the alcove. The sound seemed to be coming from deeper within this older section of tunnels. She followed it, moving cautiously. The tunnel opened into a small, circular chamber, lit by a single, bare bulb hanging from a frayed wire. In the center of the room, surrounded by discarded tools and rusted machinery parts, sat a figure. It was Subject 808. 8. He was no longer in the vast B07 chamber, no longer restrained by the massive framework. How had he escaped? Or had he been moved? He was hunched over, his grotesque biomechanical form looking even more pitiful in the dim light. The metallic filaments in his throat, which had produced those agonized screams, were now vibrating softly, emitting the strange, flute-like melody she had heard. His one free hand, the misshapen fusion of flesh and metal, was tapping rhythmically against a discarded metal pipe, creating the clanking accompaniment. He wasn't screaming. He was making music, a strange, sorrowful, profoundly alien tune. The synesthetic colors of his song were a poignant blend of pale blues and soft grays, a stark contrast to the violent reds and greens of the facility. He looked up as Lyra entered, his bloodshot eyes focusing on her. There was no immediate fear or aggression in his gaze, only a weary, profound sadness. The flute-like melody faltered, then stopped. You. The metallic filaments vibrated, the word a strained, rasping exhalation. 8, Lyra said softly. How did you get here? He gestured vaguely with his free hand towards the tunnel from which she had come. Umbral, moved, testing, new restraints. His speech was fragmented, difficult, each word an effort. The metallic filaments seemed to struggle to form the complex vibrations. He knows about Thorne's office, Lyra asked. 8 nodded slowly, a jerky movement of his head within its confining harness. Always new architects, ghost. The failsafe, Lyra said, thinking aloud. The dissonance protocol. Thorne believed it could stop the catastrophe. Eight's eyes widened slightly. He emitted a series of low clicks then. Dangerous, unstable, the instrument resists. His gaze flickered to Lyra's injured leg. Hurt. It's nothing, Lyra lied, though the throbbing was a constant reminder of her vulnerability. Eight, the broken note. I saw it on Thorne's console, I think. I think I know the counter-frequency. The color. It's silver, pure silver. Eight stared at her, his strange eyes unblinking. The filaments in his throat hummed, a low, questioning tone. Then he slowly raised his free hand, the metallic fingers splayed. He tapped one of the filaments in his own throat. A clear, metallic note rang out, high-pitched, pure. Lyra's synesthesia flared. A brilliant silver, the silver. That's it, she exclaimed, her heart leaping. That's the frequency, can you sustain it? Eight looked down at his own mangled form, then back at Lyra. A long, sorrowful hiss escaped the filaments. Weak, damaged, umbral, tuning, broke me, he gestured to his throat. This voice, not strong enough, alone. But then a new light flickered in his tortured eyes, a spark of something akin to defiance. He tapped the filament again, producing the pure silver note. Then he looked at Lyra expectantly. She understood. He couldn't sustain it, not with enough power to affect the entire instrument, but perhaps together. Her own synesthesia, her ability to perceive and internalize sound, was her only weapon. If she could focus on that silver note, that pure counter-frequency, perhaps she could amplify it, resonate with it. She didn't know how, but the thought, born of desperation and Thorne's desperate hope, felt undeniably right. Okay, Lyra said, taking a deep breath. Okay, 8, let's try. She closed her eyes, focusing all her attention on the image of that pure, crystalline silver thread, the visual echo of the note 8 had produced. She tried to hum it, to feel it resonate within her own chest, her own vocal cords. It was difficult, alien. 8 struck the note again, clearer this time, more sustained. The silver light pulsed in Lyra's mind. She concentrated, pushing past the pain in her leg, pushing past the fear, trying to match that frequency, to become a conduit for it. Slowly, tentatively, she began to hum. Not a normal hum, but something deeper, something that seemed to originate from the very core of her being. The silver thread in her mind brightened, thickened. A change occurred in the room. The ambient hum of the facility, the oppressive purples and greens, seemed to recede slightly. The single bare bulb flickered. A faint, high-pitched whine began to emanate from the walls themselves, as if the ancient wiring was reacting. Eight's eyes widened. He struck his filament again, his metallic note joining her hum. The two sounds, one biomechanical, one purely human, began to intertwine, to harmonize in their opposition to the instrument's dominant song. The silver light in Lyra's mind grew stronger, brighter. She could feel it now, a powerful vibration coursing through her. It was exhilarating, terrifying. She was tapping into something, some latent ability Thorne had unknowingly predicted. Suddenly, a section of the far wall cracked. Then another. Dust rained from the ceiling. The facility was reacting, fighting back. The deep thrum of the main instrument surged. a wave of oppressive purple energy pushing against their fragile silver harmony. Stronger, 8 rasped, his own note wavering slightly under the pressure. It resists. Lyra pushed harder, pouring all her will, all her perception, into that single, pure silver frequency. The colors in her mind became a battleground, silver against purple, gold against green. She felt as if she were about to be torn apart by the warring sonic forces. Then, with a deafening crack, a large section of the ceiling collapsed, showering them with debris. The bare bulb shattered, plunging the room into near-total darkness, broken only by the faint, internal glow of 8's remaining optical components and the swirling, violent colors of Lyra's synesthetic battlefield. The instrument was fighting back with physical force. Their attempt to create a counter-frequency was having a direct, destructive effect on their immediate surroundings. And Warden Umbral, she knew with a sickening certainty, would be aware of this new, powerful dissonance. He would be coming. Chapter 7: The Warden's Wrath. Dust filled Lyra's lungs, choking her. The sudden darkness was disorienting. The only illumination the faint, internal glow from 8's optical sensors and the swirling, chaotic colors of her own synesthetic perception. The silver harmony they had briefly achieved was shattered, overwhelmed by the instrument's violent backlash and the oppressive purple-green hum that surged back with renewed intensity. Lyra, 8's voice was a strained, metallic whisper, barely audible above the groaning of the damaged structure and the roar of the main instrument. Debris littered the floor around them. "I'm here," she coughed, pushing a chunk of fallen concrete off her legs. Her injured thigh screamed in protest. "Are you all right?" "Functional," he rasped. A section of the ceiling had narrowly missed him. His strange, flute-like melody was gone, replaced by a series of low, anxious clicks from his vocal filaments. The attempt to generate the counter-frequency had failed, or at least been violently interrupted. But it had shown Lyra something crucial. She could influence the sonic environment, however crudely. And the instrument, or whoever controlled it, was clearly threatened by that potential. A new sound cut through the gloom, the heavy, rhythmic clank of metallic footsteps approaching rapidly down the tunnel. Warden Umbral. He was coming, drawn by the surge of dissonance they had unleashed. "We have to move," Lyra urged, scrambling to her feet. "He'll be here any second." 8 struggled to rise, his biomechanical limbs scraping against the debris-strewn floor. He was clearly damaged, his movements more jerky and labored than before. "Can't. Fast." There was no time. Umbral's footsteps were closer, accompanied by the whirring and clicking of at least one cord strider. They were trapped in the collapsing chamber. Lyra frantically scanned their surroundings, her synesthetic vision piercing the gloom. The main tunnel entrance was undoubtedly blocked by Umbral, but the collapse had revealed something else, a narrow fissure in the far wall, partially obscured by fallen rubble. It was small, probably leading to an even older, unmapped section of the facility. "There," she pointed, "maybe we can get through." She helped 8 to his feet, his metallic frame surprisingly heavy. Together, they stumbled towards the fissure, clearing away loose debris as quickly as they could. The opening was tight, barely wide enough for a person to squeeze through. For Eight's bulkier, more rigid form, it would be a struggle. Umbral's voice boomed from the tunnel entrance, amplified and distorted, resonating with cold fury. The catalyst will not escape. The instrument demands its tuning. A blast of sonic energy, a visible wave of distorted air, slammed into the chamber, shaking the remaining walls. The chord strider's menacing clicks followed close behind. "Go," Lyra yelled at Eight, pushing him towards the fissure. "I'll try to slow them down." Eight hesitated, his glowing optics fixed on her. "No, Umbral, too strong." "Just go." She spun to face the tunnel entrance as the chord strider appeared, its red eyes burning in the darkness, Umbral's tall silhouette framed behind it. Lyra did the only thing she could think of. She closed her eyes, focusing on the memory of the discordant, chaotic shriek she had accidentally produced in Thorne's office by twisting that dial. She tried to recreate it with her own voice, a raw, desperate scream imbued with all the fear and defiance she possessed, pushing it outwards with her amplified synesthetic perception. The effect was immediate, though not as powerful as the console's blast. A wave of fractured white light, shot through with jagged black static, erupted from her. The chord strider faltered, its sensors flickering. Umbral let out a guttural snarl, momentarily shielding his face. It bought them a few precious seconds. Eight, with a groan of protesting metal and flesh, was forcing his way into the narrow fissure. Lyra turned and scrambled after him, just as the chord strider recovered and lunged. Its hooked claws scraped against the rock face an inch from her heel. The fissure was a tight squeeze, the rough rock tearing at her clothes. She could hear Eight ahead of her, his metallic limbs scraping, his strained breathing a series of gasps and hisses. Behind her, the chord strider was trying to force its way in, its claws scrabbling, its chassis too wide for the narrow passage. Umbral's enraged shouts echoed from the chamber. The fissure twisted and turned, descending deeper into the earth. It opened into another tunnel, this one ancient, crudely hewn from the rock, supported by rotting wooden beams. The air was thick with the smell of wet earth and something else, something faintly sweet and cloying, like overripe fruit mixed with chemical decay. The pervasive hum of the main instrument was fainter here, muffled by layers of rock and soil. Eight was leaning against the tunnel wall, his breath rasping. One of his optical sensors was dark, damaged during his passage through the fissure. "Safe, for now." "I don't think anywhere in this place is safe," Lyra replied, her own breath coming in ragged gasps. She looked back at the narrow opening. No sounds of immediate pursuit. For the moment they had eluded Umbral. But their attempt to create the counter-frequency had clearly provoked a powerful response. The instrument wasn't just a passive machine. It was an active, hostile entity, and Umbral was its zealous guardian. Thorne's dissonance protocol, Lyra mused, looking at Eight. He knew it would be dangerous. He knew the instrument would resist. Eight nodded, his remaining optic dim. "Architect, understood. The beast." He gestured to his own mangled form. It's broken. Tooth." "The silver note," Lyra said. "We almost had it. If we could find another console, something like Thorne." "All networked," Eight rasped, "but Umbral controls primary nexus. He will, anticipate. They were in a desperate situation. Injured, hunted, with no clear path to safety or a way to re-engage the dissonance protocol. And the catastrophic harmonic event, the unraveling that Thorne had feared, was still an imminent threat, its angry red pulse a constant throb in Lyra's synesthetic vision. As they rested, a new sound reached them, subtle at first, a soft, rhythmic dripping, and then a faint, almost inaudible chorus of whispers, seeming to emanate from the very walls of the ancient tunnel. Lyra tensed. Did you hear that? Eight's remaining optics swiveled. Whispers, always whispers, in the deep places, the earth remembers the instruments, birth. The whispers grew slightly louder, coalescing into sibilant, overlapping voices, too indistinct to understand, yet filled with a sense of ancient sorrow and malice. The cloying, sweet decaying smell intensified. Patches of a strange, bioluminescent fungus, glowing with a sickly yellow light, became visible on the tunnel walls, casting eerie shadows. This was the domain of the bioluminescent fungi, another of the facility's horrors mentioned in hushed online tones, their spores said to induce vivid, terrifying hallucinations. We need to keep moving, Lyra said, a new urgency in her voice. This place felt wrong in a way that was different from the mechanical menace of umbral or the raw power of the instrument. This felt older, more primal. They pushed on, deeper into the ancient tunnels. The whispers followed them, a constant, unsettling murmur. The patches of glowing fungi became more frequent, their sickly yellow light the only illumination. Lyra tried to hold her breath when passing the densest patches, but the air was thick with their sweet, cloying spores. Her synesthetic vision began to distort. The familiar colors of the instrument's hum, the purples, greens, and reds started to bleed at the edges, overlaid with new, unsettling hues. A shifting, nauseating chartreuse, a deep, bruised indigo. Illusory sounds began to flicker at the edges of her hearing, faint, childish laughter, the crying of a baby, the distorted strains of a forgotten lullaby. The spores were taking effect. 8 too seemed affected. His movements became more erratic, his remaining optic flickering. He occasionally emitted low, distressed clicks, unrelated to his attempts at speech. The tunnel opened into a larger cavern. The source of the dripping sound was here, a slow, steady drip of black, viscous liquid from a massive, pulsating organic sac suspended from the ceiling, like some grotesque, ripe fruit. The sac was covered in the same glowing yellow fungi, and the whispers were louder here, seeming to emanate directly from it. In the center of the cavern, arranged in a loose circle, were several hunched figures. As Lyra and 8 approached, the figures slowly turned. Their faces were pale, their eyes wide and vacant, reflecting the yellow fungal glow. Their mouths moved silently as if mimicking the whispers. They were human, or had been. Now they were little more than shells, their minds seemingly consumed by the fungi and the whispering voices. The lost choir, perhaps, another half-forgotten legend of Voronoi. One of the figures, a woman with long, matted hair, raised a trembling hand and pointed directly at Lyra. Her lips moved, and a single, clear word cut through the chorus of whispers, amplified by the cavern's acoustics. Catalyst. Lyra froze. How did they know? Were the whispers sentient? Or was this just a hallucination, a projection of her own fears and Thorn's prophecies? The other figures turned their vacant gazes upon her. They began to advance, slowly, shuffling, their silent mouths still working. They weren't aggressive, not in the way the Cord Striders were, but there was an unnerving, inexorable quality to their approach, a sense of being drawn into their silent, whispering madness. The synesthetic colors swirled around Lyra, a sickening vortex of chartreuse, indigo, and the instrument's oppressive purples. The illusory sounds intensified. The crying baby now sounded like it was right beside her ear. She felt a wave of profound disorientation, her own thoughts becoming fragmented, slippery. Fools! A new voice, sharp and resonant, cut through the cavern, not umbral, not eight. From a shadowy alcove at the far side of the cavern, the chanter emerged, its dark robes flowing, its crystalline rod held aloft. The rod pulsed with a clear, white light, and the sickly yellow glow of the fungi seemed to dim in its presence. The whispering voices faltered. "They are lost to the fungal echoes," the chanter intoned, its voice cutting through Lyra's spore-induced confusion. "Their minds are but vessels for the chattering decay. The true song is beyond their comprehension." The shuffling figures recoiled from the chanter's light, shielding their vacant eyes. The chanter glided towards Lyra and ate. "The Unmaker's rage has driven you into the deep warrens," voice unveiled. "But even here the path to the mending can be found." Its hidden gaze fixed on Lyra. "Your attempt to awaken the architect's dissonance. Crude, but it revealed the strength of your resonance. You are indeed the one." Lyra struggled to clear her head, fighting against the lingering effects of the spores. "Stay away from me," she managed, her voice hoarse. "The Unmaker will recalibrate," the chanter stated, ignoring her warning. "He will hunt you with renewed vigor. Your only hope lies in embracing your purpose. The broken note must be mended. The listener awaits." The chanter's crystalline rod pulsed again. "I can shield you from the fungal echoes, guide you through these lost passages, but you must come with me. Time grows short. The catastrophic harmony approaches its crescendo." Lyra was trapped between the insidious madness of the fungal echoes and the zealous fanaticism of the chanter. Umbral was still out there, a relentless hunter, and Eight, her only ally, was damaged and fatting. The weight of Voronoi, its history, its horrors, its impossible demands, pressed down on her, threatening to crush her. The path forward was shrouded in terrifying uncertainty, each potential choice leading to a different kind of damnation. Chapter 8: The Chanter's Path. The chanter's presence, while unwelcome, had an immediate, tangible effect. The sickly yellow glow of the bioluminescent fungi receded further, and the oppressive chorus of whispers diminished to a faint, background murmur. The shuffling, vacant-eyed figures, the fungal echoes, cringed away from the clear, white light emanating from the cultist's crystalline rod, retreating into the shadowy recesses of the cavern. Lyra's head began to clear, the worst of the spore-induced hallucinations subsiding, though a residue of disorientation lingered. "The Unmaker's destructive frequencies have temporarily disrupted the fungal network," the chanter intoned, its voice a calm, resonant hum in the relative quiet. "A brief respite, we must use it." Its hidden gaze seemed to pierce through Lyra. Your efforts with the architect's dissonance were illuminating. You possess a raw, untamed connection to the sonic weave, untrained but powerful. Lyra stared at the robed figure, suspicion warring with a desperate need for any reprieve from the facility's relentless horrors. "What do you want from me?" "To guide you," the chanter replied, its tone unwavering. "To help you fulfill the prophecy. The broken note is a wound in the fabric of existence. Its dissonance summons unwanted attention. Only the true harmony, achieved through its mending, can appease the listener and restore balance." "The listener," Lyra scoffed, remembering Thorne's terrified writings. Thorne believed appeasing it meant annihilation. A sound like a dry chuckle, a rustle of air within the chanter's hood. The architect saw only the shadow, not the dawn. The listener is change, transformation, the end of one cycle, the beginning of another. The mending is the key to that transition. 8, who had been leaning heavily against the cavern wall, his remaining optic dim, let out a low, metallic groan. Lies, deception, the chanters seek to unravel all. His voice was weak, strained. The chanter's hooded head turned slowly towards 8. The damaged component speaks from its pain. It cannot comprehend the purity of the true song. It is mired in the unmaker's discordant filth. The crystalline rod pulsed, and 8 flinched, a series of pained clicks emanating from his vocal filaments. "Leave him alone," Lyra snapped, stepping protectively in front of 8. The chanter's focus returned to her. "Your compassion is noted but misplaced. Such attachments are fragments of the old, dying world. The song requires focus, purity." The cultist gestured with the rod towards a narrow passage leading out of the cavern, one Lyra hadn't noticed before. "The Unmaker will soon trace the disruption you caused. His hounds will be upon us. This way leads to the resonant chambers, older, deeper parts of the instrument, where the foundations of the broken note lie. There your true work can begin." Lyra was caught. To stay meant facing umbral again, or succumbing to the fungal echoes if the chanter withdrew its protection. To go with the chanter meant walking into a different kind of trap, one cloaked in mysticism and zealotry. "And if I refuse?" Lyra challenged. "Then you condemn this world to the Unmaker's chaotic symphony, or the silent, empty madness of the fungal void," the chanter stated simply. "And the listener, unappeased, will turn its gaze elsewhere, leaving only echoes. Your unique resonance will be wasted, a flicker of potential extinguished." The cultist paused. "The choice, as always, is an illusion. The current flows towards the mending. You can resist and be broken by it, or you can become its vessel." The oppressive weight of inevitability pressed down on Lyra. Every path seemed to lead to her being used, her unique abilities exploited for some monstrous purpose. But the chanter offered, at least, a temporary shield from the immediate threats, and perhaps, just perhaps, access to the deeper parts of the instrument might offer another opportunity, another way to understand, to fight back. "All right," Lyra said, her voice flat. "We'll go with you, but if you try anything—" "My only desire is the mending," the chanter interrupted, its tone smooth. "Your safety until that point is paramount. The voice unveiled must be protected." The cultist turned and glided towards the narrow passage. "Follow, and silence your damaged companion. Its discordant vibrations attract unwanted attention. Lyra helped Eight to his feet. He was weak, his biomechanical frame shuddering. "Don't trust," he rasped, his one good optic fixed on the chanter's retreating form. "I don't," Lyra whispered back, "but we don't have many options." They followed the chanter into the narrow passage. The crystalline rod cast a clear, steady light, keeping the encroaching fungal glow and the insidious whispers at bay. The tunnel twisted downwards, the air growing colder, drier. The distant hum of the main instrument was still present, but it felt different here, as if filtered through layers of ancient rock and forgotten machinery. The passage opened into a series of interconnected chambers, vaster and more ancient-looking than anything Lyra had seen before. The architecture was strange, non-Euclidean, with curved walls and archways that seemed to defy gravity. Colossal, tarnished metallic structures, like the petrified organs of some long-dead leviathan, filled these spaces. Pipes, thicker than a human torso, snaked across the floors and ceilings, many of them cracked and leaking a fine, metallic dust. This was clearly part of the instrument, but an older, perhaps prototypical layer. "The deep resonators," the chanter announced, its voice echoing in the vastness. "Forged in the early days when the architect first communed with the designs, the energies here are purer, less corrupted by the unmaker's later modifications." The chanter led them to the center of one of the largest chambers. Here, a massive crystalline formation, similar to the one in the obsidian room but far larger and more complex, rose from the floor. It pulsed with a slow, deep blue light and emitted a low, almost inaudible thrum that resonated in Lyra's bones. This thrum, unlike the main instrument's oppressive hum, felt cleaner. The synesthetic colors here were predominantly deep indigos and clear, crystalline whites, with fewer of the jarring greens and reds. "This is a primary node," the chanter explained, gesturing towards the crystal. "From here, the foundational frequencies of the instrument are generated. The broken note has its roots deep within this matrix." The chanter glided to a section of the wall where a series of levers and dials, made of some dark, unidentifiable metal, were embedded. "The unmaker's control is weaker here. His cruder frequencies cannot easily penetrate these depths. Here, we can begin the attunement." "Attunement?" Lyra asked, her suspicion rising again. "Your resonance must be focused, purified," the chanter replied. "The raw power you possess needs to be shaped, honed, to resonate perfectly with the counter-frequency required to mend the note." The cultist manipulated one of the levers. A section of the massive crystal began to glow brighter, and the low thrum intensified, focusing into a single, pure tone. The synesthetic color of this tone was a brilliant, almost blinding silver, the same silver Lyra had perceived as the counter to the broken note, the same silver Eight had managed to produce with his damaged vocal filaments. "You recognize it," the chanter stated, its hidden gaze on Lyra. "It is the echo of the true sound, the frequency that will heal the fracture." Lyra stared at the glowing crystal, at the shimmering silver light that filled her vision. It was undeniably powerful, undeniably pure. But the chanter's talk of purification, and shaping, her abilities sounded dangerously close to umbral calibration. What exactly does this attunement involve? Lyra asked, her voice wary. You will immerse yourself in the true sound, the chanter explained. Allow its vibrations to permeate your being. Your own resonant frequency will align with it, shedding the dissonant echoes of the mundane world. You will become a pure conduit. The chanter gestured towards a shallow, circular depression in the floor before the glowing crystal. The resonant font, its energies will facilitate the process. Lyra looked at the depression, then at 8, who was watching the chanter with his one dim optic, a low, guttural click emanating from his throat. He clearly didn't trust this. Neither did Lyra. And what if I can't control it? Lyra asked. What if this true sound overwhelms me? The song does not overwhelm, it integrates, the chanter replied. Resistance is the only source of pain. The cultist's tone was patient, almost soothing, but with an underlying current of unyielding fanaticism. The unmaker will be searching. His hounds are likely already scenting the upper tunnels. Time is a luxury we do not possess. The chanter was right about umbral. He wouldn't give up. And this deep chamber, this primary node, did feel different. The oppressive weight of the main instrument was lessened here. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was a genuine opportunity. A dangerous one, certainly, but an opportunity nonetheless. If I do this, Lyra said slowly, if I attune myself, will I be able to control the counter-frequency? To use it as Thorn intended, to disrupt the broken note, to stop the catastrophe. You will become one with the counter-frequency, the chanter corrected. You will be the mending. The catastrophe is but a symptom of the dissonance. Heal the note and the symptom vanishes. The listener will be appeased. The chanter's words were a careful semantic dance. It wasn't a direct answer to her question about control. It was all about the mending, the listener. Lyra took a deep breath. The swirling silver light from the crystal was hypnotic, alluring. It promised a purity, a clarity that was almost seductive after the chaos and horror of the upper levels. But a small, rational part of her mind, Thorn's desperate warnings echoing within it, screamed caution. What happens after the mending? She asked. The chanter was silent for a moment. The only sound was the pure, silver thrum of the crystal. Then it spoke, its voice softer, almost reverent. The great transformation. The listener's song will reshape all that is. And you, voice unveiled as the harbinger, the mender, will have a place of honor in the new dawn. A shiver traced Lyra's spine. A place of honor. It sounded less like a reward and more like a final, irreversible absorption. She looked at 8. He met her gaze, and though he couldn't speak easily, his single optic conveyed a clear message: danger, trap. The chanter waited patiently, a figure of absolute, unwavering conviction. The silver light pulsed, beckoning. The choice once again was Lyra. Embrace this dangerous, potentially consuming path to mend the note according to the chanter's dogma, or find another way, risking umbral's wrath and the facility's myriad other horrors. The pure, silver frequency was undeniably real, undeniably powerful. But in whose hands, for what ultimate purpose, would that power be wielded? Chapter 9: The Resonant Font. The chanter's patience was an unnerving, silent pressure. The pure, silver thrum of the massive crystal filled the ancient chamber, its synesthetic light a beacon of alluring clarity. Lyra felt drawn to it, the promise of order amidst the chaos of Voronoi, a powerful siren song. Yet, Eight's silent warning and Thorn's desperate journal entries echoed in her mind, a counter-melody of caution. "If I am to do this," Lyra said, her voice carefully neutral, "I need to understand more. Thorn." Dr. Thorn believed the instrument was trying to achieve a forbidden harmony, one that would open a gateway to something destructive. "The architect was limited by fear," the chanter responded, its voice smooth and unperturbed. "He perceived only the destructive aspect of cleansing, not the creative potential of renewal. The gateway is not to destruction, voice unveiled, but to rebirth. The listener does not destroy, it reshapes." "Reshapes into what?" Lyra pressed. "Into a purer form, a truer resonance," the chanter stated. "The current cacophony of existence, it is an aberration. The listener's song will correct it." It was a terrifyingly abstract, chillingly dispassionate vision of cosmic reengineering. Lyra looked at the shallow depression in the floor before the crystal, the resonant font. "And this attunement, what will it do to me? Will I still be me?" "You will be more," the chanter replied. "Your current form is a vessel, limited. The true sound will expand your perception, merge your consciousness with the fundamental frequencies of existence. You will become an echo of the listener's own voice." An echo, not a person, not Lyra. She made her decision. She would not surrender her will herself to this cosmic ideal, however pure its silver light appeared. "No," Lyra said, her voice firm. "I won't do it. I won't be your vessel or your echo." The chanter's robed form stiffened almost imperceptibly. The air in the chamber seemed to grow colder. The pure silver thrum of the crystal faltered for a fraction of a second, a flicker in its steady pulse. "Your resistance is regrettable," the chanter intoned, its voice losing some of its soothing quality, a harder edge creeping in. "The mending is inevitable. Your cooperation would make the transition smoother." "I'm not interested in a smooth transition into whatever nightmare you're envisioning," Lyra retorted, backing away from the resonant font, moving closer to 8. "The Unmaker will find you," the chanter warned. "His methods of attunement are far less considerate. He will shatter your mind and enslave your resonance to his discordant machine. Here you would have found purpose, purity." "I'll take my chances," Lyra said, though her heart hammered against her ribs. The chanter was silent for a long moment. The crystal's silver light seemed to dim slightly, the pure thrum taking on a subtle, almost mournful quality. "So be it," the chanter finally said, its voice flat, devoid of its earlier fervor. "The path of resistance is paved with suffering. You will learn this." The cultist raised its crystalline rod. Lyra tensed, expecting an attack. But instead, the chanter touched the rod to a specific point on the massive crystal formation. The silver light flared, then abruptly died, plunging the vast chamber into a disorienting gloom, lit only by the residual glow from the deepest parts of the crystal and the faint, distant hum of the main instrument, which now seemed to assert itself more strongly. The pure, clean thrum of the deep node was gone. "The resonant font is now sealed to you," the chanter announced, its voice echoing in the sudden dimness. "You have rejected the gift. The fungal echoes will reclaim these lower warrens. The unmaker's hounds will find your scent. You are adrift, voice unveiled." With that, the chanter turned and glided into one of the shadowy archways, disappearing into the labyrinthine depths of the ancient resonators. The protection of its light, which had kept the fungal influence at bay, was gone. A heavy silence descended, broken only by Eight's labored, metallic breathing and the returning, insidious whispers from the deeper parts of the facility. The sickly yellow glow of the bioluminescent fungi began to reassert itself at the edges of the chamber, casting long, dancing shadows. "Foolish choice," Eight rasped, his one good optic flickering, "but right choice." "I couldn't let it consume me, Eight," Lyra said, shivering slightly in the sudden chill. "But now, what do we do?" The chanter's departure had left them vulnerable. Umbral was undoubtedly still hunting them. The fungal echoes would soon be active again, and their one potential weapon, the pure counterfrequency, seemed lost to them without the chanter's crystal or Thorn's console. "Thorn's office," Lyra mused. "If we could get back there, his console, the dissonance protocol." It was a desperate, almost suicidal idea. Umbral would have fortified it if he hadn't destroyed it outright. Too guarded, Eight confirmed her fears. Umbral not stupid, he will expect. As if on cue, a distant sound reached them, the faint, unmistakable baying of the silence hounds, closer than before, and interwoven with it, the rhythmic clanking of cord striders. Umbral was indeed closing in, his search patterns becoming more effective. The whispers in the chamber grew louder, more insistent. The sickly yellow fungal glow intensified, creeping further into the room. Lyra could already feel the tendrils of disorientation, the phantom sounds and images, beginning to cloud her perception again. "We can't stay here," Lyra urged, pulling Eight towards one of the other archways, away from the direction of the approaching hounds. "We need to find another way, another node, something." Her synesthetic vision, which had been so clear and focused in the presence of the chanter's silver frequency, was now becoming muddled again. The oppressive purples and greens of the main instrument's hum shot through with the nauseating chartreuse of the fungal echoes. But amidst the chaos, she could still perceive those faint, tantalizing threads of silver and gold, the potential counterfrequencies, the echoes of Thorn's failsafe. They were weaker now, harder to discern, but they were still there. They stumbled through the ancient, cyclopean chambers, the whispers and the fungal glow growing stronger with every step. Illusory figures flickered at the edges of Lyra's vision. Eight, too, was clearly struggling, his movements becoming more uncoordinated, his one optic dimming and flaring erratically. They came to a section where the ancient architecture had partially collapsed. A massive, pipe-like conduit, easily 10 feet in diameter, lay fractured, its interior a dark, gaping maw. It seemed to lead upwards, towards what might be a different level of the facility. In there, Lyra hesitated. The conduit was lightless, its destination unknown. "Better than hounds or spores," Eight rasped, already trying to pull himself towards the opening. With a surge of effort, they managed to hoist themselves into the fractured conduit. It was slick with a viscous, oily substance, and the air within was cold and stagnant. They crawled upwards into the oppressive darkness, the sounds of the hounds and the whispers receding slightly behind them. The conduit ascended at a steep angle for what felt like an eternity. Finally, it leveled out and opened into a small, dark chamber. This room was different again. It was lined with metallic panels, and the air hummed with a low, electrical charge. A single, reinforced door with a small, barred window blocked their path. Lyra peered through the window, her breath caught in her throat. Beyond the door was a control room, not as ancient as Thorne's office, but clearly a significant nexus. Consoles, alive with flickering lights and scrolling data, lined the walls, and in the center of the room, seated before a large, central interface, was Warden Umbral. He was not alone. Several Cord Striders stood guard, their red optics sweeping the room, and standing beside Umbral, observing a complex holographic display that seemed to depict the entire facility's sonic architecture, was the Chanter. Lyra recoiled from the window, her mind reeling. The Chanter. With Umbral, had she been played? Was their ideological conflict a sham? Or had the Chanter, angered by her refusal, decided to ally itself with its former enemy? "What?" Lyra whispered, stunned. Before 8 could respond, a new sound reached them from within the control room, a high-pitched, piercing whine, growing rapidly in intensity. On the holographic display, a single point of angry red light, the broken note, began to pulse with alarming speed. "The cascade is accelerating," Umbral's amplified voice declared, a note of grim urgency in his tone. "The containment field is failing. The catastrophic harmony is upon us." The Chanter's robed figure gestured towards the display. The voice unveiled rejected the mending. Her resonance is now unanchored. It may be adding to the instability. Umbral's head turned, his obsidian eyes seeming to stare directly at the reinforced door behind which Lyra and 8 hid. Her interference has been problematic, but her unique frequency signature is still key. If she cannot be attuned, she will be repurposed. Her raw resonant energy will be fed directly into the dampening matrix. Lyra's blood ran cold, repurposed, fed into the machine, a fate perhaps even worse than becoming a component. The piercing whine from the control room intensified, becoming almost unbearable. The facility began to shake violently. Cracks appeared in the walls of the small chamber they occupied. The catastrophic event Thorne had warned about, the unraveling of reality, was beginning, and she was trapped, with her two most powerful adversaries apparently joining forces, their attention now fixed firmly on her. The threads of silver and gold, the potential counter-frequencies, seemed almost invisible now, drowned out by the screaming red pulse of the imminent apocalypse. Chapter 10: Unholy Alliance. The violent tremors shaking the facility were a physical manifestation of the screaming red pulse that dominated Lyra's synesthetic vision. The broken note was on the verge of shattering whatever fragile equilibrium Voronoi maintained. Dust and debris rained down from the ceiling of the small chamber where she and Eight huddled, trapped behind the reinforced door that separated them from Umbral and, impossibly, the Chanter. Repurposed, fed, into, Matrix, Eight rasped, his one good optic flickering wildly. He understood the horrific implication of Umbral's words. Lyra wouldn't just become a component. Her very life force, her unique resonant energy, would be consumed to temporarily patch the failing system. A living battery drained dry. The alliance between Umbral and the Chanter was a terrifying development. Had their earlier conflict been a charade, a complex manipulation to guide her, or had her refusal to cooperate with the Chanter driven the cultist to this desperate pact with its supposed nemesis? The Chanter's earlier pronouncements about the mending and the listener seemed utterly at odds with Umbral's desire to control and perfect his discordant machine. Yet here they were, side by side, as reality itself threatened to unravel. "We have to stop them," Lyra said, her voice tight with desperation, though she had no idea how. The dissonance protocol in Thorne's office was inaccessible. Her own attempts to generate a counterfrequency had been met with violent resistance from the instrument. The piercing whine from the control room escalated, a sound that felt like needles being driven into her brain. The red pulse of the broken note on the holographic display, visible through the small, barred window, grew larger, angrier, consuming the other sonic signatures. "The primary resonant coils are overloading," Umbral's amplified voice announced from the control room, a new urgency, almost a hint of strain in his tone. "The structural integrity of the core chamber is compromised. We need more power for the dampening field now." The voice unveiled, the Chanter's resonant hum cut through the rising chaos. "Her unanchored resonance is a wild variable. Bring her. Her energy can be channeled." Lyra saw Umbral nod curtly. He gestured, and two of the cord striders in the control room turned towards the reinforced door, their red optics locking onto it. They began to advance. There was no escape. The conduit they had crawled through was their only entry point, and likely a death trap if they tried to retreat. Eight pushed himself upright, his damaged frame groaning in protest. He positioned himself between Lyra and the door. "I will slow them." "Eight, no," Lyra cried. "You're too damaged." "My purpose," he rasped, the metallic filaments in his throat vibrating with a strange, sorrowful resonance. "To protect the true note." He looked at Lyra, his one optic surprisingly clear, conveying a depth of understanding that transcended his broken form. He wasn't just a failed component, he was a guardian in his own twisted way. The cord striders reached the door. Powerful metallic impacts began to shake it. The locking mechanism groaned, then shattered with a screech of tearing metal. The door buckled inwards. Eight lunged forward, a guttural metallic roar erupting from his vocal filaments, not a scream of pain, but a defiant war cry. He slammed his biomechanical bulk against the incoming cord striders, his one good arm lashing out, its misshapen metal fist connecting with a strider's sensor cluster. The control room beyond the doorway erupted into chaos. Cord striders screeched, their limbs flailing. Eight fought with a desperate, suicidal fury, his damaged body absorbing blows that would have crippled a normal human. He was buying her time, precious seconds. Lyra's gaze was drawn back to the holographic display in the control room. The red pulse of the broken note was overwhelming, but beneath it, almost invisible, she could still perceive those faint, delicate threads of silver and gold Thorn's dissonance protocol, the potential counterfrequencies. They were like whispers in a hurricane, but they were there. Thorn's console was out of reach. The chanter's resonant crystal was sealed, but her own synesthesia, her amplified ability to perceive and interact with sound, it was her only remaining weapon. She remembered Eight producing that pure silver note, the note that had resonated with her own perception of the counterfrequency. She remembered how, together, they had briefly created a harmony that had physically affected the facility. She closed her eyes, shutting out the immediate chaos of Eight's desperate battle, the tremors, the piercing whine. She focused all her will, all her perception on that single, pure silver thread. She visualized it, felt it, tried to become it. She began to hum, a low, tentative sound at first, then growing in strength and purity. It was the note Eight had shown her, the note that was the antithesis of the screaming red dissonance. In the control room, amidst the clang of battle, both Umbral and the chanter turned their heads sharply. The holographic display flickered. A thin, almost imperceptible line of silver appeared, intersecting the monstrous red pulse of the broken note. "What is she doing?" Umbral snarled, his attention momentarily diverted from Eight's sacrificial stand. "Her resonance," the chanter murmured, a new, unreadable inflection in its voice. "She is attempting to self-attune, to generate the counter-harmony directly." Lyra pushed harder, pouring every ounce of her concentration, her life force, into that single, pure silver frequency. The silver line on the display grew brighter, thicker. The oppressive red pulse flickered, its intensity wavering for the first time. The physical effect was immediate. The violent tremors lessened slightly. The piercing whine from the control room's machinery dipped in pitch, its agonizing sharpness easing. Eight, still locked in brutal combat with the cord striders, seemed to sense the change. He let out another defiant roar, his blows finding their mark with renewed strength. One of the striders crumpled, its red optics going dark. "Impossible," Umbral hissed, staring at the display, then at the closed door behind which Lyra was hidden. "A raw, unchanneled frequency cannot. It should tear her apart." "Unless," the chanter began, its hooded head tilting as it observed the display, "unless the architect's seed of dissonance was more than just code. Perhaps it was a receptive matrix, awaiting a specific resonant key." Lyra felt a searing pain in her head, in her chest. The effort was immense. The instrument was fighting back, its vast, discordant power pushing against her fragile silver thread. The red pulse surged again, threatening to extinguish her counter-frequency. She was failing. She wasn't strong enough alone. Then, from the midst of the battle, a new sound emerged. A clear, pure, metallic note resonating with Lyra's own. Eight. Despite his injuries, despite the striders attacking him, He was producing his silver tone, adding his strength to hers. Their combined frequencies, one human, one biomechanical, merged, amplified. The silver line on the holographic display flared, becoming a brilliant, unwavering beam that pierced the heart of the red pulse. The effect was catastrophic. Not the catastrophic harmony Umbral had predicted, but a different kind of catastrophe, a shattering. The red pulse on the display fractured, then shattered into a million glittering fragments. The piercing whine from the machinery died with a final, agonized screech. The violent tremors ceased abruptly, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. In the control room, consoles exploded in showers of sparks. Lights went out. The holographic display dissolved into static. Umbral cried out, clutching his head, as his direct neural link to the instrument was violently severed. The remaining cord striders froze, then collapsed, their systems dead. The chanter stood motionless amidst the chaos, its crystalline rod dark, its robed form an island of stillness. The reinforced door to the small chamber finally gave way completely. 8 stumbled back, his biomechanical frame smoking, circuits sparking. He was grievously damaged, but he was still functional. Lyra opened her eyes, gasping. The synesthetic colors were gone. The oppressive hum, the angry red pulse, the silver threads all vanished. There was only quiet, a deep, profound quiet she had never experienced before. Not the auditory vacuum the facility had supposedly achieved, but a true, restful silence. The silence of a machine that had finally, definitively broken. Chapter 11. The Weight of Silence. The silence was vast, almost a physical presence, pressing in after the cacophony that had defined Voronoi. Lyra's ears rang, a phantom echo of the instrument's death throes. She felt drained, hollowed out, as if her very essence had been poured into that final, desperate act of sonic defiance. 8 leaned heavily against the doorframe, his metallic breath a series of ragged hisses. His one good optic was dim, but it was fixed on Lyra with an expression she could only interpret as gratitude, or perhaps shared exhaustion. In the wrecked control room beyond, Warden Umbral lay crumpled beside his shattered console, unconscious or dead. His connection to the instrument, his life's work, had been violently severed. Without its song, he was nothing. The chanter remained standing, a still, dark silhouette in the emergency lighting that had flickered on. The cultist slowly turned its hooded head towards Lyra. The mending. The chanter's voice was a dry whisper devoid of its usual resonant hum. The crystalline rod in its hand was inert, its light extinguished. It is, not as foretold. There was a note of confusion, perhaps even disappointment. The instrument is broken, Lyra said, her own voice hoarse. The catastrophe, it's over. She wasn't sure if she believed it herself. Could it be that simple? The link to the listener is severed, the chanter stated, its voice flat. The great transformation, deferred or perhaps averted entirely. The cultist seemed to shrink slightly within its robes. Your resonance. It was not a key to unlock, but a hammer to shatter. A long silence descended, broken only by the drip of water from a broken pipe and 8's labored breathing. Lyra looked at 8, Are you still here? He rasped. The song is quiet now. A strange peace seemed to have settled over his mangled features. The constant agony that had defined his existence within the instrument was gone. The chanter took a hesitant step towards them. The architect's dissonance protocol. It was more potent than I envisioned. More absolute. The cultist paused. What will you do now? Voice unveiled. The facility is crippled. The unmaker is silenced. My purpose here is void. Lyra had no answer. The future, which had been a terrifying series of unavoidable collisions, was now a vast, uncertain blank. Escape was possible now, truly possible, but the thought of simply walking away felt incomplete. Thorn, Lyra said. Eris Thorn, he wanted to stop this. He left. Clues. She thought of his journal, his desperate hope. He needs to be remembered, not just as the madman who built this place. The chanter considered this. A chronicler, then, you will tell the tale of Voronoi silence. Someone has to, Lyra said. Another silence. Then the chanter slowly reached up and lowered its hood. Lyra gasped. The face beneath was not monstrous, not alien. It was human, surprisingly young, with wide, pale eyes that held a profound, ancient weariness. The skin was almost translucent, stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. There were faint, silvery traceries, like dried riverbeds, running beneath the skin of their temples, scars, perhaps, from their own form of attunement to the listener. My order has sought the listener's song for generations, the former chanter said, their voice now clearly, if softly, human. We believed it was salvation. Perhaps we were mistaken. They looked around the wrecked control room at the silenced machinery. This silence, it is not the void we feared. It is empty, but not malevolent. A sudden, loud groan of stressed metal echoed from deep within the facility. The floor vibrated. The structural integrity, 8 rasped, his optic flickering. The instrument was load-bearing in places. The facility was dying, not just sonically but physically. Its colossal, monstrous heart had stopped, and its body was beginning to collapse under its own immense weight. We need to get out of here, Lyra said, urgency returning. The former chanter nodded. There are older paths, ways out that Umbral himself had forgotten. I can guide you. Together, the three of them, Lyra, the synesthetic catalyst, 8, the liberated human component, and the disillusioned former chanter, whose name Lyra still didn't know, made their way out of the dying heart of the Voronoi facility. Their journey was slow, cautious. The facility groaned and shuddered around them, sections collapsing, dust filling the air. The fungal echoes were still present in the deeper warrens, but without the instrument's psychic reinforcement, they were listless, confused, easily avoided. The silence hounds and cord striders were inert, their power sources extinguished. The former chanter led them through crumbling, ancient tunnels, bypassing the routes Umbral would have known, using knowledge passed down through their order, knowledge of the facility's earliest, forgotten layers. 8 struggled, his damaged frame protesting with every step, but he did not falter. The absence of the instrument's constant torment seemed to have given him a new, quiet strength. Finally, after what felt like hours, They reached a small, rusted maintenance hatch, hidden behind a fall of rock in a forgotten sub-basement. The former chanter managed to wrench it open. Cool, fresh air, smelling of rain and pine needles, washed over them. It was the most beautiful scent Lyra had ever encountered. One by one, they climbed out. Lyra emerged last, blinking in the gray light of a dawn she hadn't expected to see. They were several miles from the main facility entrance, hidden in a dense thicket of trees. The ground still vibrated faintly, not with the instrument's hum, but with the death throes of the collapsing structure. A plume of dust rose into the air in the distance, marking where a major section had finally given way. They stood there for a moment, three unlikely survivors, covered in dust and grime, bearing the physical and psychic scars of Voronoi. "What now?" Lyra asked again, the question hanging in the cool morning air. The former chanter looked towards the rising sun, a flicker of something unreadable in their pale eyes. "I do not know, my path has ended, perhaps. A new one begins." They gave a slight, almost formal bow to Lyra and ate. "May your silence be peaceful." With that, they turned and disappeared into the trees, a solitary figure seeking an unknown future. Lyra looked at Eight. His biomechanical form seemed strangely out of place in the natural world, yet he stood straighter now, the constant tension gone from his frame. "I hear birds," he rasped, his one good optic tilted upwards. A faint, almost imperceptible metallic smile seemed to touch the edges of his fused mouthparts. Lyra listened. He was right. The chirping of birds, the rustle of leaves in the wind, the normal, mundane sounds of the world, sounds she had taken for granted, now seemed incredibly precious, incredibly vibrant. Her synesthesia, no longer overwhelmed by the monstrous frequencies of Voronoi, painted them in soft, gentle colors, pale yellows, spring greens, sky blues. The silence of Voronoi was profound, but the silence of the world outside was filled with life. Chapter 12: The Scars of Sound. Weeks turned into months. Lyra never reported the full extent of what happened at Voronoi. Who would believe her? The official story, cobbled together from emergency responder reports after the final, catastrophic collapse of the facility, was that an undocumented geological instability, coupled with the decay of antiquated industrial structures, had led to its demise. There was no mention of a human instrument, of sonic entities, or of the horrors that had lurked within its concrete shell. Warden Umbral was listed as missing, presumed dead in the collapse. Subject 808, the chanter, the fungal echoes, the chord striders, they existed only in Lyra's memory and in the fragmented, unverified whispers of the Internet's darkest corners. She tried to return to her life as an audio archivist, but everything was different. The world sounded different. Her synesthesia, once a source of academic fascination and occasional mild inconvenience, was now a constant reminder. The mundane sounds of everyday life, traffic, conversations, music on the radio, were still painted in colors, but now those colors were overlaid with a faint, residual memory of Voronoi's oppressive purples, greens, and reds. It was like a permanent afterimage burned into her perception. She couldn't listen to certain types of music anymore, especially anything with deep bass frequencies or complex layered harmonics. They brought back flashes of the instrument, of Umbral's cold gaze, of the chanter's silver-lit chamber. Silence, too, was different. It was no longer a canvas of subtle hues, but a void that sometimes thrummed with the phantom echo of the instrument's broken heart. 8 against all odds had survived. With the help of a reclusive, off-grid cyberneticist Lyra had tracked down, a contact whispered on one of the same fringe forums that had first led her to Voronoi. Some of his more debilitating biomechanical components were removed or stabilized. He could never be fully human again. His body, too, intertwined with the alien technology of the instrument, but he was free from its control, from its constant pain. He lived quietly now, in a remote cabin the cyberneticist had provided, finding a strange solace in the natural world, his remaining optical sensor often fixed on the patterns of leaves or the movement of clouds. His metallic voice, though still rasping and difficult, sometimes even attempted to mimic the songs of the birds he now cherished. He and Lyra spoke occasionally, their conversation stilted but filled with an unspoken understanding that no one else could share. They were the only two who truly knew what had transpired in the depths of Voronoi. Lyra dedicated herself to one final task related to the facility, compiling Eris Thorne's story. She retrieved what she could from her memories of his journal, cross-referencing it with declassified documents and archived research papers. She wrote of his genius, his ambition, his descent into horror, and his desperate, last-minute attempt to create a failsafe. She didn't mention the supernatural aspects, the listener, or her own synesthetic role. She framed it as a cautionary tale of scientific hubris, of a project that had spiraled out of control due to unforeseen resonant mechanics and the fanaticism of its chief technician. It was a sanitized version, but it was Thorne's truth, or as much of it as the world could handle. She published it anonymously, through an obscure academic press. Perhaps, somewhere, someone would read it and understand the dangers of sounds that were more than just vibrations in the air. The broken note was silenced. The catastrophic harmonic event was averted, but the scars remained. Lyra knew that Voronoi, or places like it, built on the edge of human understanding and cosmic indifference, might exist elsewhere. The universe was filled with sounds, some beautiful, some mundane, and some, perhaps, that were best left unheard, their frequencies undisturbed. Sometimes, late at night, when the world was quiet, Lyra would sit in silence, and the phantom colors of Voronoi would dance at the edge of her vision. She would focus on the memory of that pure, silver thread, the counter-frequency she and 8 had unleashed. It was a reminder of terror, but also of a strange, desperate triumph. A reminder that even in the face of overwhelming, monstrous power, a single, true note of defiance could, sometimes, shatter the symphony of despair. The silence that followed was not empty. It was filled with the weight of what had been, and the quiet, uncertain promise of what might yet come. The song of Voronoi was over, but its echoes would resonate within her for the rest of her days. The end.